Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 11th of April of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to start with Artemovsk. As you can see, there are a lot of icons in this area. The Russian sources and the Ukrainian sources published a lot of video and photo confirmation of the results of clashes inside the town. Today the head of Wagner's Prigozhin reported that they control around 80% of this town, including the central part of Bakhmut. He published his own map of Artemovsk, and according to his map, the central part was under Russian control. Furthermore, he reported that Ukrainians controls just 10% of western part of Bakhmut and of Artemovsk. And furthermore, he added that another 10% is in the gray zone between Russian forces and Ukrainian forces. The Minister of Defense of Russian Federation, for the first time since the beginning of the special military operation, called Wagners as the main forces who currently storms Artemovsk. Also, the Minister of Defense added that the flanks of the Wagner group are protected by the air divisions. If we take a look at the western deployment map, we're going to see that the northern flank is under protection of 106 Air Assault Division, and there are 3 battalions, 3 groups, 3 units, and all these units belongs to Wagner, and currently they are storming the western part of Bakhmut. The Russians took a decision to deploy their air assault division on the north because they understand that if the Ukrainians are going, and if they're going, Ukrainians are planning to start any unblocking and counter-offensive operation, everybody understands that this is the only possible way for the Ukrainian forces. So that's why the Russians need to be sure for 100% that they are able to defeat and repulse any Ukrainian attack. Furthermore, if we take a look at Bakhmut inside, today there was first photos and videos of the railroad station, where currently there are very heavy clashes. And this railroad station is almost reduced to ruins. And the thing is that, by the way, if when talking about the entire the previous 24 hours, more and more sources from the Ukrainian side talk about the possible retreat from Artemovsk. More and more sources were saying that the battle for Artemovsk comes to its logical end. And of course, we understand that sooner or later Artemovsk is going to fall. But the thing is, the question what I have, how the Ukrainians are going to retreat and to step back from this town. Currently, they're overpopulated and over-concentrated in the western part. It is very difficult to retreat from this town. As we discussed, the number of Ukrainian forces that located currently in Artemovsk is around from 10,000 till 15,000 soldiers. Let's move to the deployment map, and this map shows a lot of interesting updates. First of all, as you can see, if we take a look at this map, that the main force that the Ukrainians took a decision to keep in Bakhmut is territorial defense forces that are located along the combat line, and the volunteer forces. There are Georgian forces, Chechensky forces, Belarusian forces, and so on. And when talking about combat line, mainly there are territorial defense forces. Also, there are some number of special forces, but the main goal of the special forces in Artemovsk, currently in the western part, to keep this block on the west, because this is the main block, and until the Ukrainians are able to keep this area, they can think, or they can count on at least some kind of evacuation, rotation, or at least retreating, at least with the minimum losses. As if the Ukrainians lose this block, the entire Bakhmut will be encircled, and the forces that currently in Bakhmut will be destroyed and will be captured or something like this. Also today we received the first confirmation about the Ukrainian forces on the north and western part of Bakhmut from this area. If you take a look at this map, there are 241st Brigade, there is first Mariupol forces, there is Spartan forces, and so on. And the Russians are saying, and some sources published, that these forces are currently something like blockaded or in a small operational encirclement, at least this 241st Brigade, at least the parts of this brigade. And the sources are saying that this brigade asked for some kind of evacuation and some kind of safe road for their forces to retreat and step back. And they were asking for this since the beginning of April. And as far as I understand, as far as I know, the Ukrainian military authorities haven't provided them any roads, safe roads for evacuation. And today there was the first confirmation that exactly the parts and the groups of that brigade took a decision to leave their position without receiving an order from the military authorities of Ukraine. If you remember, almost every single collapse of every single town during the special military operation always started from at the point when some parts, some battalion, some brigade took a decision to leave their position and to step back without receiving an order from the military authorities. If you remind you just a few cases. For example, Solidar fell, and the entire Solidar, the entire operation, encirclement operation of Bakhmut started exactly at the same time when the 118th Territorial Defense Brigade in Yakovlevka were defeated, had a lot of damage. They asked for help for evacuation, but the Ukrainian military authorities didn't provide them help, and they took a decision to leave their position without receiving an order. And that was the first step after the entire Solidar has fell. Another situation was in Rubizhno in Severodonetsk, but as I remember, there were talks about 57th Mechanized Brigade or 59th, and they also took a decision, or 72nd, they took a decision to leave their position under very heavy fire, and after that the entire front line collapsed. And the same situation we can find almost all over the front lines. And today we received the first confirmation that some parts in Artemovsk, after weeks or maybe months of requiring for some evacuation, they took a decision to leave their position by their own. And of course, the situation can speed up the entire storming operation of Bakhmut, because until the Ukrainians are there, until they're holding their position, of course, they can win some time, maybe a month. But if some brigade or battalion take a decision to leave, and if the neighboring battalions see the situation, of course, this can make a collapse effect, and every single brigade will take a decision to leave the entire Artemovsk, and after that they will appear and fight themselves somewhere in the fields between Chasov Yar and Artemovsk under very heavy artillery and air fire from the Russian side. The thing that I'm trying to say that situation in Artemovsk is very critical, and we understand one more time that Artemovsk is going to fall very soon. The question I have, how the Ukrainians are going to evacuate and save this 10,000 army. From the current perspective, I don't see any solution for the Ukrainians. The only solution is to save maybe 30 or 40% of this army, and the rest of the army will be destroyed under heavy Russian fire. For example, the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that during the clashes in the vicinity of Artemovsk and on the rest of the Donbass front line, the Ukrainians lost something around 490 soldiers, 19 armored vehicles, including 4 tanks and 4 artillery systems. Furthermore, on this front line, Donetsk, the Ukrainians lost 3 Raiders and TPQ-50. So we can say that this is the heaviest losses from the Ukrainian side since the beginning of the special military operation. And we see that the entire situation is breaking up in Russian favor. And very soon, the entire front line can be collapsed in many places, not just in Artemovsk, also in the vicinity of Avdiivka. For example, today the Russians reported that as a result of bombings and artillery duels and missiles attacks, the Russians destroyed the ammo depot of 110th Brigade in the vicinity of Achertina. If we go back one more time to the deployment map, we see that this brigade, 110th Mechanized Brigade, is located along the road N20 in direction of Konstantinovka. And this brigade is under very heavy fire, and since during the previous months, the Russians, we can say that they were hunting for this brigade, and during the previous week they destroyed one headquarters of this brigade. Today they destroy another ammo depot. So we can see that the Russians are focused on the brigades and on the Ukrainian forces that located on the north from Avdiivka, not to the west, not in this small salient, but to the north, exactly on the move in direction of Konstantinovka. So possibly the Russians have already started some kind of preparation of movement from the Avdiivka bridgehead to the north to Konstantinovka. Let's call it encirclement of Toretsk, New York agglomeration. So the Ukrainian losses are very heavy in this area. Furthermore, the Russians are saying that there are very heavy clashes and there are very heavy artillery preparation in the vicinity of Marinka. During the day, the Russians attacked another checkpoint in Krasnogorovka, another convoy of Ukrainian forces on the way from Kurakhova to Marinka. The Russians destroyed some Ukrainian positions in Paraskovivka, Novomikhailivka. Furthermore, the Russians report about destroying of another artillery system in the vicinity of Vadiana, and as usually, Ugledar is under very heavy fire. The Russians reported that as a result of all these clashes on the South Donetsk front line, the Ukrainians lost 50 soldiers, 1 armored vehicles, and 2 artillery systems. The losses is not so heavy, but as you can see, a lot of damage was dealt to the infrastructure, military infrastructure of the Ukrainian forces. When talking about Zaporozhye area, there are also a lot of very interesting updates, and the most important ones are coming from Orekhov. As we discussed during the previous videos, the Russians now currently are focused in this area. They're bombing Orekhov heavily. During the first bomb attack with the guided bombs, the Russians destroyed 1 hangar and barracks of Ukrainians, and as a result they destroyed a number of tanks and armored vehicles. A few days ago they managed to attack another barracks and hangars in this area. As a result of that attack, the Ukrainians lost up to 4 tanks, few armored vehicles, and a few trucks, and few artillery systems. And today the Russians are saying that there was another attack in Orekhov. They also published some video and photo confirmation of that, but they still haven't provided any numbers of the losses from the Ukrainian side. When talking about Kherson, there are also very heavy artillery duels. As you can see, the Russians destroyed a lot of artillery systems, at least 6 artillery systems on the Ukrainian side. They destroyed 2 Gvozdika, D-30, Grad, Akatsiy. The Russians continue attacking with the guided bombs on this small bank of the Dnipro River, trying to get the Ukrainian position that they're using for some river marine operation and so on. From the Ukrainian side, the Ukrainians continue shelling and bombing the Russian bank of the river, the towns along the Dnipro, and of course there are casualties among civilians but the Russians haven't provided any numbers about the losses from their side. As a result of duels, as a result of activity in this area, the Russians reported about the number of drones that were shot down in this area, who were making some intelligence about the territory of Russian Federation. And when talking about Kupiansk front line, there are also some kind of activation in this area. And if you remember, a few days ago we discussed that the Russians changed their tactic in this area, and we were saying that the main Ukrainian forces are located along the Oskol River, and the main Ukrainian forces are located along this river, and to do some rotation, the Ukrainians needs to cross a very big distance between their position and the position of Ukrainian forces that located along Zhiribets River. And of course, these cause a lot of problems to the Ukrainians, because there are no barriers, there are no places where the Ukrainians can hide, and of course all the forces are under Russian vision, under Russian control, and as a result of any attempt to make some kind of rotation, the Russians attack the convoys and they achieve success. Furthermore, if you take a look at the Russian sources map, we see at least 3 places, like the first one in the vicinity of Sinkovka, the second one in the vicinity of Ketляrovka, and the third one is in the vicinity of Stelmakhovka. The Russians are saying that on Kupiansk front line, at least at 3 places, they managed to break and to ruin the Ukrainian plans to make a normal rotation. What does it mean? That means that there are a lot of Ukrainian forces on the combat line who already tired from this situation, and they haven't been rotated, let's say, since the beginning maybe of November or December. And of course they don't have a normal supply, normal support, and of course the Russians they're exhausted, and of course the Russians try to create such a situation when they are able, after one small attack, collapse the entire front line and to force the Ukrainians to step back, the tired Ukrainian forces to step back. One more thing about Avdiivka front line. The Russian sources are saying that almost every single day there are more and more Ukrainian soldiers who surrenders in this area. If you remember, a few days ago we discussed that the Russians are saying that normally, or every single day, there are from 20, something around 30 soldiers who surrenders from the Ukrainian side. And now the Russians are saying currently this number is increasing every single day. So the situation for the Ukrainians is very difficult on the front line. Furthermore, don't forget that many videos ago, in the beginning of March and maybe in the end of February, I told you that I expect that in the end of March or in the beginning of April, the Russians are going to start mobilization process. And the logic is very simple. The thing is that in the beginning of April, the Russians turn their clothes, their uniform, from the winter one to the summer one. So this is the best time to start mobilization, because the Russians are ready for this, because they were preparing for this during the previous period of time, during the winter. And today is 11th of April, and we don't see any mobilization, at least till today. For example, today the Russians adopted very interesting law. And this is some kind of law about mobilization, about some kind of accounting and checking and making all the necessary things about the mobilization. And they're saying that they're going to send a mobilization application to the soldiers, a mobilization notes to people using the electronical services. Not as they used to do this before, using the papers and so on, trying to catch people on the streets to give them this mobilization application, and after that this person is obliged to go to the some kind of military places and so on, military authorities and so on. Currently the Russians took a decision to use electronic services for these purposes, and there are a lot of things related to this adoption. First of all, if a person is selected to be mobilized, from this very moment he can't leave country. The borders are closed for him. Furthermore, if he is not coming to the mobilization centers, the Russians are able to cut and to stop his driving licenses. So a lot of things. As you can see, the Russians have already finished the preparation to start the global massive mobilization. And I believe that soon they're going to start this, because if they were not planning to do any mobilization, for what purposes they adopted this law, and for what purposes they took a decision to use electronic services to send mobilization applications. Furthermore, if we are talking about the Ukrainians, there were a lot of discussions about the same way, but the Ukrainians took a decision not to adapt the situation and not to send these mobilization like notes, messages to the men using the electronic services. So they took a decision not to do this. I don't know why, but maybe because they were afraid of that the Ukrainian population, men will leave Ukraine immediately. And the Russians found a solution how to do this, and we'll see what is there going to be next. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you can condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon. Have a good day. Bye bye.